Just a note that this podcast may touch on difficult themes and include some challenging conversations, so please take care when listening. This is The Widow Diaries, a podcast that holds space for the often unspoken stories of grief, love, and life after loss as a young widow. I'm Caroline Winter, and like so many, I've been on this journey. So come with me each episode and hear from others who've also walked the winding path of widowhood in their own way. The Widow Diaries, for First Light Widowed support, where no story is the same and every story matters. It goes without saying, but being widowed is a really tough life lesson. You shrink until you're barely recognisable, and then after trekking through the windy, sometimes treacherous grief wilderness, you emerge back into the world as the now you. That now me is a better version of myself. In some ways, I'm happier and definitely more rounded, which still pains me to say. I mean, didn't Richard deserve for me to be that way when he was alive? But the truth is, his death has helped make me who I am today, and I can't change that. I can only go with it. So what can death teach you about living? Well, that's something that Lisa Corduff has thought a lot about. She's a speaker, coach, writer, podcaster, and a solo parent whose journey into widowhood didn't start when her husband Nick died, but in the slow unravelling caused by his battle with addiction. When he lost that battle, Nick and Lisa had been separated for 9 months. And while that added to the complexity of death, the grief, the love and the impact of his loss remained deep and enduring. Lisa is bold, honest, and she's very funny, and is committed to helping others find their way through the hard seasons. Lisa Corduff, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
I'd really like to start today by talking about Nick, if you're okay with that. How did you meet and what drew you to him?
So I met him. He was actually a friend of my brother's, which was tricky, but I'd been with someone for 6 years, and I think I was 23 at the time, and we'd broken up, and my brother was being great, just supporting me, getting me out and about. And he said, "You know what? You should come and see my friend Nick performing." He was studying aerospace engineering, but he was a musician, so he wrote and performed his own songs. So hot. Anyway,
smart and
creative. I was like, all right. And the weird thing, I'd actually met him before. He'd been over to our house, and I remember just being like, oh, this guy, he was an op shop dresser, like really eclectic and creative, and he was gorgeous, like he was handsome. But I was with my boyfriend at the time, so, you just sort of park that. But then when my brother invited me out to go and see him, I literally sat watching this guy sing his own songs and was like, I will be with you at some point in the future. But because he was a friend of my brother's, I was also like, I don't know how this is going to happen, but it definitely will. And my brother went overseas shortly after that. Nick and I sort of struck up a friendship. And little did I know, at some point, he actually emailed my brother and said, I'd like to ask Lisa out on a date.
Oh my gosh.
Would that be okay? I know that this is weird. She's your sister. We're friends. And he was like, yes, you can. And so, yeah, that was that.
What a gentleman. Okay, so you got the green light from your brother, and I assume you went on that date and it continued on. What was it about Nick, once you got to know him, that connected with you?
He was so smart and such an interesting thinker. He was also really affectionate, like physical touch, definitely a love language. And, I think I'd been with someone who was just very straight. And so someone who read books and thought about life from a completely different angle he introduced me to a whole new world. I was really, really stimulated by him, intellectually, emotionally. Like he wrote poems. He would just write me these poems, and I was just like, no, I was a victim of it. Like I had no control. It was happening, and it was kind of this. I mean, it was a really delicious love. Like people were like, whoa, you two together. We couldn't get enough of each other. I mean, I remember a few years after that, we moved out together and we lived in a place for, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, and then we moved to another place, and there were stairs to get up to the front door, and I'd literally run up those stairs to see him at the end of the day. It was a really beautiful connection. I felt sorry for other people who didn't get to experience the type of love that I had with him. It was really, I know it was such a gift for this lifetime for me, for sure.
Your description of a delicious love, I've not heard that before, but it really does sum it up quite beautifully. So tell me, you eventually did get married and started a family.
Yes, we did. So it was 2008. It was the end of 2007, and I'd been working on a TV show, and that stopped. And Nick decided to go for a job with Qantas. And he was like, there's no way I'm going to get this job. Because he would have moved to Sydney. And I was like, you're definitely going to get this job. Anyway, of course, he did get the job. And it was right at that end of 2007. And he was like, well, if I go, would you come with me? Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, of course I would. Let's go. And he said, well, then I think probably we should get married. Like that would be the right thing to do. Like it was more just like well, if I'm going to do that, like your parents better know that I'm serious and I will love you and all of this sort of stuff. And so, we got engaged and we took off to Sydney, and we were actually gone for 10 years. So we got married in 2009 and we had our first child in 2010, so living in Sydney, and then the second one came along 2 years later, and then we're like, let's get back to Melbourne because we've got 2 little kids now and it would be great to be around family. We're originally from Melbourne, and the aerospace engineering industry is small, and it ended up that he got a job in Brisbane. Uh-oh. So we then moved our little family to Brisbane where I knew no one, and we had our third child in 2014 in Brisbane. We spent a decade all up away from home, but we moved back in 2017.
Okay. So you had married the man of your dreams, your delicious love. You had 3 children, young children. Careers were going along smoothly. What were you doing at this stage, apart from clearly being a full-time mum? But were you working as well?
Yes. So I sort of always was working. After my first child was born, I was really interested. That was sort of the time when we were starting to kind of cop on to the fact that the food we were eating might not actually be real food, and it might actually be impacting all sorts of health. I remember, I Quit Sugar came out around those times, and paleo. I remember that sort of time. Very much. And I was like, bloody hell, what do I feed my child if I want him to grow up healthy? What do I eat? Mm. And so I started to sort of deep dive into food, and I actually got a scholarship to do this course. It was actually through Sarah Wilson, who it was the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Anyway, it was this online 12-month course. It was meant to make you a health coach. I never called myself a health coach. I didn't think I was really qualified for much at the end of that course. But it opened my eyes big time to food and how confusing that whole world was. And I just came to this conclusion in myself and for my family that if we could eat food that was actual ingredients and real food most of the time, and we also enjoyed our almond croissants and fish and chips on a Friday, I'd be happy with that. So I just started to make these small changes. And when we moved to Brisbane, I had no friends. I'm an extrovert and I had no one to talk to, so I was very cliche, started a blog. Excellent. Back in the blogging days, yes. And it was all about food. I started a Facebook page and then I started selling Thermomixes. Yeah. It was the rage at the time, and it got me out of the house.
The modern day Tupperware.
Oh, look, it was. Yep. How did I sell a $2,000 kitchen appliance? I did very well. Anyway, it was also giving me this education into what was going on in other people's homes. I mean, I was literally going into people's homes and looking at food and going, oh gosh, we're in a bit of strife here. And my Facebook page kept growing. I have a background in journalism. And so I was sharing videos sort of before it was cool to do that. And I ended up creating an online business. So I started a course called Small Steps to Whole Foods, and it was an 8-week online program back in 2014. So I'm a bit of a dinosaur in the online education space, and it did really, really well. And that little just backing myself and having a crack back then allowed me to not go back to the workforce in a traditional way, but build my own business. And I'm really grateful that I did that, because the flexibility that I've needed since Nick's passing has allowed me to still be there for pick-up and drop-offs for my kids and all of that sort of thing. So I built that business in nap time. I got ninja at getting all 3 of my children down for a nap at the one time, and I knew I'd have 2 hours, and I got it done.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, Nick's career was going well, but he was definitely struggling. So
struggling how? Can you describe for me?
Well, he was very, very anxious, so he struggled with anxiety. And we talked a lot. Like, he actually started a blog, and his blog was called Rat Race Philosophy. So he decided to study. He went back to uni and studied philosophy whilst working full-time as an engineer and 3 kids.
Wow.
You know, that's the type of person he was. Yeah. Because he was like, what are we doing? Why are we sitting in cars, going into these small cubicles? Like, this is not a life. And he was always trying to manage that artistic, creative side of himself, the big thinker, and you know, he'd get lost in it. He painted every night. Like, a year before he died, he had an art exhibition, filled out this room with all of his paintings.
Oh my goodness. And
then also needing to feed the family. You know, so we talked all the time about building my business up so that he would have more flexibility, but he was getting more and more not okay. And you know, I look back now, I mean, I remember it was probably 2016, and he found the description for Asperger's, which they called it back then, which that word is not used any longer. And he was like, he always called me Betty. I called him Max. So he was like, Betty, look at this. It's me. And I was like, oh my God, it explains everything. That is you. And he took it to his psychologist. And his psychologist looked at him and said, no, I mean, you're looking at me in the eyes. You've got a great job and a loving family. You definitely don't fit the profile of an autistic man.
Wow.
Yeah, my wholehearted belief is that if he had been acknowledged as autistic in that moment, that he would still be alive, because what was going on, just subtly and it took a lot of time, was he was using alcohol to just kind of take the edge off. He used to say that, I'm just taking the edge off. The kids, you know, he used to walk around our house with little earbuds in his ears because the noise of the children was just a lot for him. You know, before we understood sensory stuff and all of that kind of thing, he was trying to manage himself, trying to just be the best dad, be the best husband, be the best worker as an autistic man, not knowing that that's what it was. And so the alcohol became a problem in itself, and it turned into addiction. And he entered rehab for the first time in 2017 in Brisbane, and that's when I decided to move us home to Melbourne.
Right. And did you sort of stay apart, albeit supportive and together also still from a distance?
He was in rehab for 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks. And yeah, there was absolutely I was like, wow, we've got to get to the other side of this. We need to get you the help that you need to be able to stabilize the drinking so that then we can figure the other stuff out, because it had really sort of flared up. He was out of control of it. And addiction is a whole thing. It's a whole wild beast. And then I moved us back to Melbourne. We stayed with my parents. He went into another rehab for 3 weeks. And then, we got a rental in the suburb that we used to live in, and got the kids settled in school and all of that sort of stuff. There was there was no violence, no aggression. There was nothing like that. It wasn't like I couldn't actually quite believe that that's what we were dealing with, because I had an image in my mind of what an alcoholic might look like, and it certainly wasn't my husband. And so there was no intention of leaving. But over the following 2 years, or sort of for 1.5 years, there were just periods of sobriety and his health, and then it would be relapse and chaos, and he never seemed to be able to stop. He would always have to go back into a rehab to take that time and get the support that he needed to get sober again. And it was a really, really hard time. The level of hypervigilance that I had at that time around his needs and my kids' needs, and I was trying to run the business so that we could feed our family. Nick wasn't working at the time. I mean, it was a lot. And yet I always believed he would come through.
Yeah.
In January of 2019, he actually decided to end the relationship. We were talking about what he needed to be able to maintain sobriety, and that we figured that him living somewhere separately to the chaos of 3 little kids and all of that sort of stuff might be helpful. And then he's like, well, I guess that would then mean that, we separate. And I was like, what? Mm-hmm. What the hell? But this is the thing. Addicts make decisions to serve the addiction. If he wasn't here, he could drink.
Yes. So anything that was getting in the way of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our beautiful love that was the gift of my lifetime it was like there was a third person in our marriage, and that third person was booze. And I couldn't trust him anymore. He would lie. And I would just think, it was honestly, it's like I had to grieve him. I lost him before he died. And it was, And so anyway, he ended up relapsing very badly that January and entered a sober house in the February for 6 months. And he did that. He did not want to do that, but he committed to it for the kids. He didn't want to be in the situation that he was in. He then relapsed the night he left that 6-month program, which was just unfathomable, really. And this is the thing they always say, like, that person needs to be the one who decides and owns and tries, because he was so loved. He was so, there was literally no stone left unturned for him. We tried everything over the years, and it had him. And he took himself to India to find peace. He wanted to go to an ashram. There was this guru that he'd really resonated with. And so he booked himself on a tour and, saw a whole heap of India, and it was ending in the town where the ashram was, and he didn't make it. He died in a hotel. He was booked in for a camel tour that night. It was accidental overdose. He drank a critical amount, and there was no one there to take him off the edge, So...
Oh, Lisa, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I mean, well, it's not okay. It's terrible. But I just feel like it's such a waste. It's such a waste of an amazing life. He had so much to contribute. He had kids to love, But everyone listening to this podcast knows this feeling. I'm not saying anything out of the ordinary to people who know this level of loss.
Yeah, no, you are right there. Lisa, I've read that you wrote that addiction widowed you. Can you talk about what that means to you and I guess on reflection all these years on?
He couldn't be a partner to me. He was a partner to booze, and he did things in service of the addiction. And so he became like a ghost. We couldn't make decisions. We couldn't plan. It got to the stage I couldn't trust, because I couldn't trust him, like this person who I built a life with. I loved wholeheartedly, became like a stranger to me. And so I feel like that loss you feel like the person that you have as your person, the person who is your husband or wife, I lost him while he was still alive.
Yeah.
That's what addiction often does. And just no amount of loving from one person can make it better, can bring it back.
We know that grief is complicated and complex, and regardless of the story, I guess in addition to what you had already experienced with Nick's addiction at the time of his death, as you said, you'd been separated, I understand, for about 9 months. So how did that further complicate your experience of grief and widowhood?
Well, I didn't even know if I could call myself a widow, because I'd been separated. So I didn't know. I mean, I remember his family putting a notice in the newspaper, and I didn't add my name because we weren't married. And so the kids' names were there, but I didn't know what my place was in it all. And I get so upset around the stigma addiction has, because I knew him. Everyone who knew him was shocked that this is what we were dealing with. And it's such a silent, like so many people there. Whenever I share about addiction on social media or anything like that, I just get reams of people messaging me back, because no one talks about it. It's very hidden. So at his funeral, it was which was a lot longer after he died because of the expatriation and cause of death and all of that sort of thing. It was really complicated. It was at least a month after he died that we had his funeral, and I couldn't even share. Honestly, I did speak at his funeral. I wanted the kids to hear certain things, but his family weren't comfortable with me sharing anything about mental health, recovery, addiction, because they hadn't even shared within their circles.
Wow.
And so I have an online community. People like Nick had a course called Small Steps to Fermenting in my business. It was a total family vibes. Like there's a program called Small Steps Back to You for women, and we created 3 modules that was Back to You for blokes that Nick created. And so they knew him. Yeah. And I couldn't say a word about how he died in respect for his family. So I felt like I was kind of muzzled, and I gave everyone time, and then I felt like it was really important for my healing and me moving through it, because authenticity is a very core part of who I am. I find it hard to be fake, like you kind of know where you sit with Lisa. And yet I felt like I was kind of, I wasn't able to be the real me. And so I shared the story on my podcast, and maybe 18 months after he'd passed. And it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever done, and they're still the 2 most listened to podcast episodes, because people want to understand the story. They have shared it with friends who are going through something similar. It matters to share real stories, because I do believe that they heal us. It heals us to share stories and talk about these tricky topics like grief and addiction, but also for other people to hear themselves in other people's stories provides different perspective. I mean, it's probably the reason why this podcast is happening too. Do you know, it's just, And it was complicated on many, many different levels. But the thing that I've maintained all the time is that my children will never, ever feel any shame or anything about the way that their dad died. I explained it to them in very simple terms. They understood that he was in a house because he was drinking the alcohol too much and all of those sorts of things. They didn't get it. They were 5, 7 and 8 when he died. They didn't really get it, but I've always given them the facts, and we celebrate all the time how awesome their dad was, because he was.
Absolutely. And that doesn't disappear. I'm going to come back and ask you a bit more about how you celebrate Nick or how you mark him. I'd just like to pick up on something that you said, which is so interesting, and that's around that tension around using the word widow, which, frankly, nobody wants to be labelled with at all.
No.
But how did you come to claim it, to embrace it, to be comfortable with it? Was it part of being able to tell your story authentically in that eventuality of time?
Yeah, it's really interesting, my relationship with that word, because I'm very conscious to the stories that we attach to things. So, and it's that idea of like a widow at 39.
It's crazy, right? I was 37. You're just like, what?
Were you?
That doesn't happen.
Hang on. No. Isn't it some old nonna wearing black?
Walking up the middle of the street. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Like, hang on. It doesn't actually feel like who I am. But do you know what? I have very unique challenges in my life and my parenting that aren't the same as other people's. You know, when I see people throwing around the word, you know, oh my gosh, yeah, my hubby was away, I was sole parenting this week. I'm like, get stopped. Like, what do you mean sole parenting? Or even parents who are divorced and have a co-parenting situation, they can't call it sole parent. You don't know what it's like to literally not have anyone there to bounce ideas off, to check in with, to share. You know, my son on the weekend, just his soccer team hadn't had any goals for the first 4 matches, and he bloody got a goal in. He's not even a goalie. And it was like, I did tears in my eyes, and I just think, are you watching this, Nick? Do you see this? Like, where's the person who gets how cool this is? Oh my God, I get teary now even thinking about it. But I miss him every single, you know, our daughter just got braces on Monday, and I'm like, where are you? Yeah. You know, it's just, there's just a nothingness. Well, I have built a relationship with him, which we can absolutely talk about, but it's just something that, like, I'll claim widow, because that is what I am. The person who I was married to, loved, adored, like never wanted anything more than him, never even contemplated life without him. And the person who I chose to have children with is not available to me in any capacity.
Yes, and that's exactly it. When you talk about that solo parent or co-parent versus co-parent, like just physically, mentally, emotionally, just not there.
It's just a nothing. It's a void.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a loneliness attached to that a lot of people can't understand. Even I'd love to be able to be really cranky with him as a co-parent.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Even just that is, at least it's something. At least it's not nothingness. Yeah. And forever, like forever. I was partnered for 4 years, and that was beautiful. And he wasn't parenting my children. And even if someone did come into our lives that, you know, was engaged, he was very engaged with them. But it was always, I think, because Nick had died, it was like, it was very clear he's not coming, he's not here to replace dad, he's not here to be your dad. You know, he's who he is, and the role for that was very clear and unique. But like the rest of my life, I will raise these children as their only blood parent. So yeah, I'll claim widow.
I like that. You've just put a new spin on it, I think. And you're forced to. You're forced to claim widow too. At the end of the day, that's what it is, and that's where you are. And in terms of feeling, you know, that perhaps being separated wasn't wasn't a good enough reason to be called a widow. Which is clearly not the case, but was that something that took a while for you to come to terms with and go, yes, I actually am. That is
I
who
think
I am.
so. And I think that's where the whole addiction widowed me before he died came from. To sort of say he was lost to me. I felt like by the time he died, I'd already grieved him so hard. I had grieved that the life we were going to live wasn't going to be, that he was taken from me. And also I could see he was taken as the dad that he always wanted to be. There was so much grief in those years of him in active addiction that when you see someone also in that amount of pain, even although it wasn't a terminal illness in the way that you see someone's body shutting down, he was in a lot of pain. And it's terrible to say a relief, but I was pleased that he was at peace for him.
Yeah.
He didn't have to, he could rest. Yeah. And because I loved him, that felt like that wasn't a big leap for me to get to, and I immediately felt this sense that I think he's going to be a better support to us from where he is than perhaps what he was able to do in the physical world.
Wow. You've had an incredible, I hate the word journey, but that's what it is, to get to this point. How, in the time since losing Nick to now, because we know that grief is not linear and it will just pop up wherever and whenever, but how do you care for your own grief and also while supporting your kids through theirs and keeping Nick as part of your story?
That's a really good question. I think for me, in the beginning, I absolutely overfunctioned my way through.
Yes. Sorry, that just sounds very familiar.
Very familiar. I'm like, I've got to be there for the kids. I've got to keep this ship afloat, blah, 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 blah. There was so much to do. I was almost sort of manic. So he died in September 2019, and then we headed into the COVID years here in Melbourne, and suddenly, I couldn't distract myself. It was like I was alone with it. And to be honest, it still took me a long, long time to allow myself to properly grieve, because I felt like if I actually allowed myself to feel what I was feeling, I might never get up.
Yeah.
And I was scared for myself and for my kids, and I just distracted the heck out of myself for as long as I could. And as we all know, grief is coming. You can't outrun it. No. You might try, and it'll get you. And it did. And so I realized I was just going to have to trust that the waves would come. And if I allowed myself to actually feel it and do what I needed to do and let it move through me, that I might be okay. And it proved that I was okay. I mean, I had lots of times where I absolutely don't feel okay. But I think there's this thing of the grief. You think you've grieved. You think you've been sad. And then there's some new level where you're like, oh my God, I didn't even realize I had to grieve that aspect. Or I didn't realize that this situation would trigger that. What? Hang on, where am I? And so now I'm just so kind to myself with the grief. I see it as like a partner. It's like a friend of mine. It's like, hey, you're here. Yeah, I can see why. And we just kind of spend some time, we hang out, get curious to it. There's this little dingy pub in the city that Nick used to love going to, and we'd often meet there before we were going out or doing something, and he'd sit and he'd be journaling, and it was definitely, there was cigarettes being smoked in that underground pub way beyond when the rules were that you can't smoke. And every time I'm there, I feel him.
Wow.
And sometimes when I just feel like I'm not afraid anymore to feel him go there, I'll take my own journal and I'll just sit. Sometimes I just sit and talk to him in my head, have a pint.
Love it.
And sometimes I just write. And sometimes I'm really angry at him. Sometimes I'm asking for guidance. I'm not too sure. I just want to tell him things about the kids that no one else would really care about. And it's like I have this channel. It's like I know I can go there. I can feel whatever I need to feel, and then it's done. You know?
Yeah. And going back to what you said before, it sounds like you've found a way to, in some ways, kind of fill that void of him not being with you.
Yeah. Well, at Camp Widow, when I did the keynote there, I shared about a ring that I bought. So I just felt like I needed like a crystal or some sort of something to kind of reflect the relationship that I have with him now. So I found this ring in George Jensen, actually, and it was these two parallel rings joined together at the back. And I thought, as soon as I saw it, I started crying. I thought, that's perfect. Because at the back where it's joined, it's like, that's where we were together in my life. That was my time with Nick. And then the fact that there's these two lines that they can't touch, they don't touch, but they're right next to each other, makes me feel like it represents how I feel, that he's still traveling with me, he's still around, I just can't see him, I can't touch him. And I wear that every single day. I literally never take it off. And to me, that's kind of where I've gotten to with it. But it's taken a long time to, feel a level of peace around that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm. Thank you for sharing that story as well. I think there's a lot that can be drawn from that from all of us, because the void of that person, when they literally disappear, and you do that, they must be somewhere. They might, But having something, a ring or something that you can look at and it can describe your situation and your feelings so beautifully. I can imagine that would be a comfort every day.
It really is. And, there's also, I can remember a friend of mine, she lives in Perth, and I don't know, it was definitely a few months after Nick had passed, and she called me up and she goes, Lisa, well, I just finally got in to see that psychic medium that I've been on her waiting list for 9 months, and 45 minutes of that 1 hour was just Nick. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Gosh.
And she said he was just there. He needed to get messages through. He wouldn't leave.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, shivers. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry about that. And she is not the only person who I experienced that with. 2 others had the exact same thing. I thought, okay, maybe I need to go and see someone myself so he can come through, which has a whole story attached to it. But anyway, this day, she said, he really, really wants you to know that he's coming through in the music. He will come through in the music. I was like, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
Yes. And then, anyway, we got off the phone and I went inside, and, Spotify's just doing its Spotify randomness. And one of his favourite songs came on. And it was Justin Timberlake. He had a very eclectic music taste. Justin Timberlake was an odd one. But anyway, it was the song Mirrors by Justin Timberlake. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny? Like, that's funny. That's his one of those songs that he loved. And then I looked at the lyrics, and it's basically like, you can't see me. Like, look in the mirror. I'm staring right back at you.
Oh my gosh, I just got absolute shivers down my spine. You are kidding me.
If you went and had a look at the lyrics to that song, it was out of control. But anyway, I talked to the kids about it, actually. I said, I wonder if there's going to be special songs that, Dad plays. And they requested, at his funeral, Billie Jean, because he was a mad Michael Jackson fan, and the Beatles, Let It Be, because he also loved the Beatles. And so over the years, I cannot even tell you the times that Michael Jackson or the Beatles, I mean, I know they're very common, but it's happened at weird times. And now the kids and I just look at each other and go, oh, hi, Dad.
Lisa, you've mentioned the kids a couple of times and they are obviously older now, but it sounds like Nick is very much, in your house, in your lives, in your thoughts and your conversations. Have there been any unexpected gifts or growth or clarity that has come out of this experience for you and for the children?
Oh, yeah. I talk about the gifts of grief. I could never paint it as a winning situation to have him die, ever.
No.
It's not. So, but the four of us are such a connected, joyful little unit. I would say it has made my mumming bigger because when Nick died, a few weeks later, my son said to me, Mummy, who's going to take us to 7-Eleven? And because, I'm the whole foodie. I'm like the eat your vegetables, turn off the TV. Like I'm just mumming myself around town.
You're not sneaking through the drive-through for hot chips.
No. He introduced them to McDonald's and Slurpees. He'd be like, guys, let's go for a walk. Just tell Mum we're going to the park. And, go get them a little chocolate or something like that. And I realised in that moment my son felt like he'd lost the fun parent. Like, oh my God, we've lost the guy who brings the fun. And it broke my heart and it made me realise that I can never be him. I can never be Nick. I can't bring all of the amazingness that he would have brought to their lives. But I get to evolve what mumming means. And I have done such fun stuff. I have been involved with my kids in ways that I probably wouldn't if he was still around. And for that, I'm really grateful. It has enriched my life. I think I look at families where kids are hating on their parents or rat out their parents and my kids just don't do that. I think that they feel like they're lucky to have me. They value me maybe in ways that other kids don't because they know I could die. And that is so unfortunate and I wish they didn't have that worry, which is very present for them. And we've struggled a lot with separation anxiety, especially me going away on planes. Their dad died when he was away.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot to work through, a lot of therapies and all sorts of different things, but they're good. And we are probably closer as a family than perhaps we would have been. And I've experienced a level of depth with young kids that has made them more empathetic. They don't realise that there is a strength to them yet, but I can see it compared to other kids. I can see them just being a little bit more aware. Like they experienced something very big at a very young age. It made them worldly. It made them know that things can change. We lose people. They're 10, 12 and 14 now. And so heading into the teenage years, look, if there's going to be a gift from a dad who dies through alcohol, it's also that we have very real conversations about the risks of those sorts of things, and they're probably a bit afraid.
I had wondered about that, and that's good to know, good to hear. But then that comes from that authenticity and the honest conversations you had at the time when they were children.
Yeah, but it's been interesting. I don't drink all that much, but I do, we'll pop up to the pub on a Friday and I'll have a pint and we'll get some bowls of chips and those sorts of things and a lemonade. I'm so loose these days with food. Anyway.
Chips and lemonade.
Yeah, living on the edge. But I want to be an example to them of someone who can have one or have two. And then that's that. And so provide that. But we do have lots of conversations. My son's at an age, he's in year 9, where he's seeing friends starting to drink alcohol. And my thing with the kids has always been, let's just talk about the facts. So if he gets curious about it and wants to try a little, we can try at home, and I can explain different types of alcohol and how they affect you and how much of one is the same as another, and just demystify it. Don't make it scary. Always kind of encouraging them to take agency in their own life, but knowing that they will be feeling funky about it. I don't like being around very drunk people. So I don't know how they're going to feel about that either. And this is the thing, communication, like the fact we talk, we sit at the table every single night, they talk to me all the time, I think is the key.
Yeah. You at Camp Widow spoke as the keynote speaker, and the theme of that talk ended up being what your person's death taught you about living. And so I wanted that to be a bit of a focus for this episode here. What did your person's death teach you about living?
Gosh, so much. I mean, when any of us are confronted by death and have to say goodbye to someone, we just remember that life ends. Like, we've only got a limited time and we don't know when that's up. So for me, it's made me a lot more creative with life. I'm not interested in spending time with people or in situations that really don't feel good. If there's something going on that feels a bit off, I'm like, where have I got a choice here? How could I mix things up? What's the most creative solution to this? Instead of thinking necessarily what's logical.
Can you give me an example?
In 2023, I had some complications from a simple surgery that made me really sick, and the relationship that I'd been in for 4 years ended. And I was like, you know what? I just actually can't even pretend that I'm okay anymore. I'm not grieving, walking the same bloody pavement. I'm not doing it. And so I sat with myself and I thought, if all bets were off, if nothing was off the table, if I could choose anything in the world, because I'm going to have to live out this next little while. I'm going to have to get myself back on track. 2022 had been a really hard year in the business after COVID. You know, the online space and online learning went bananas. And I didn't feel certain about my choices, but I needed to make them, but I couldn't. And then the life that I thought I was building ended again. And I was like, what?
Come on.
This is not cool. But it was absolutely the right thing to happen, but it was still a big rejigging, and I had to just pull myself up by the bootstraps again and just like, what? So I decided, I had wanted to do this after Nick died. I wanted us to travel, the four of us together. And I was looking at the Green School in Bali, like I was looking at all these different options, like let's just get the frig out of here. and then COVID happened, so no one went anywhere. And I ended up just thinking, you know what, I'd travel with them now. My son was in year 7, grade 5, grade 3. It's only going to get more intense for them in high school. Could we go? If we did, what would we do? Where would we go? Mm-hmm. And I just started to sit with myself and think, what would need to happen to make this real? And it was like a magic carpet ride. It was like as soon as I decided, all these things just fell into place around me. Like a friend randomly said, I was talking about it at soccer. I was like, you know what? I was just thinking about going traveling with the kids, like 6 months or something. She's like, well, could we move into your house and sublet it?
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, yes, because that was a big thing. Like, if I'm going to be paying rent here and traveling, like, how am I going to? So suddenly that was taken care of. And the schools were really supportive. And, you know, all of this stuff just started to happen. And I thought, whoa, we could actually go. And I went to the travel agent. I did not have a plan, but we just did some core flights and they gave me back a quote and I went, I'm doing it. I've got a business that I can take with me on the road. I booked the tickets and 4 weeks later we left.
Wow.
And we were gone for 4.5 months and it was the best thing I've ever done. Best thing, hands down, I've ever done in my life. I didn't want to come home, but I had to. And that was because I gave myself permission to just think creatively with well, what could I do? What are my options? If I really wanted to get wild with this, what would I choose? And it was awesome.
That sounds incredibly life-changing. And if we kind of bring that back to something that someone could adopt and do in their day or in their lives, and it may not be able to be taking a gap year with the kids, which sounds incredible, what sort of advice might you give to someone who's looking to, kind of change it up too, but on a perhaps smaller scale?
I think the place where you start is, where you feel really stuck, where you feel like you've got no choice, you feel like you're a little bit of a victim of your circumstances. We all have those places in our lives. And I think with raising kids on your own, there's been a lot of them for me. I get curious around those areas. Am I really stuck, or is this just a story I'm telling myself? Have I just boxed myself in here? Really, do I have choices? And it could be absolutely anything. I used to get so frustrated that I couldn't. My favourite time to exercise is first thing in the morning. And the kids didn't like me leaving the house while they're sleeping, fair enough. And so for years and years and years, I was like, how do I use my morning? So I would get out the yoga mat, or I would do a meditation, or, I would try and, last year I spent that hour before they got up just writing. I wrote half a book and then got bored. Anyway, That's a whole other story. But do you know, it's like, hang on, I might not be able to do the thing that I want to do, but if starting the morning right is important to me, or moving my body or exercising my brain is important to me at that time, what could I do? And it just invites inquiry and creative thinking. And to anyone who is still stuck there, it's probably been the last 6 months that I've been able to get out first thing in the mornings, and I have literally never run in my life. And now I'm running in the mornings. I'm so excited to be out. I'm like, oh my God, this feels so good. There's so much, we don't stay stuck in a certain life situation, but the tiniest things, I just ask where I've got choice. Is there a different choice that I could make here? What would serve me? When Nick was in active addiction, when we moved back to Melbourne, and every day felt like a bomb could go off. It just felt so uncertain. I was unsteady in myself. I would wake up every morning and I would ask myself one question, and that, I think, saved me all these years, because it's now just become how I think. I started to think to myself, what could I do? What one thing could I do today to feel good? And sometimes it would be just sitting in a cafe to drink a coffee in the cafe instead of having a takeaway, and just being amongst life, being not in my home. And then, other times it might be, I have not spoken to, a friend for so long. I'm just going to, give her a call. That would make me really feel good. And so I found ways to fill my own cup amongst the storm. I looked, and it's taken me down all weird and wonderful paths, that simple one question.
I love that question. What could I do? And I hope that gives someone who's listening just a moment to reflect and something to change up where they're at if they are stuck. Lisa, I'm finishing all of these wonderful chats that I'm having with 3 questions. First up, what do you like to do to remember or honour Nick? Is there a particular thing outside of all the other moments that you share with him in your life?
Well, his birthday we celebrate, so the kids all get the day off school.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I know. So fun for them.
You are the cool parent.
I'm so fun.
You are.
Look, I am. Loose. And we eat his favourite foods and do his favourite things. So we'll often go op shopping, and we might go see a movie and go swimming. He swam all the time. It was like his meditation. And he loved the hot jam donuts at the South Melbourne market, so we'll go and get them. And his favourite dessert was cheesecake, so we always make a cheesecake. And he loved fish and salad. So we keep him, we give him his great day. His anniversary is honoured by lighting a candle for the day. And we talk about him and we do stuff, but I'm like, we get to celebrate Dad, and his birthday felt like the best day to do that. But I mean, in amongst that, we talk about him all the time. Oh my gosh, gee, that look on your face, that's so like Dad. Gee, you reminded me of Dad just then. Maybe you got this from Dad. What would Dad say about this? You know, he's still present in lots of different ways.
Yeah. Now, you help a lot of women through your coaching and speaking. What message would you give to someone, not just a woman, but someone who's navigating early widowhood?
Accept help. I found it so hard to admit I wasn't okay. I mean, yeah, I wore self-sufficiency like a badge of honour. And I think there's so many people who are watching and willing and wanting to help and support. And so finding, like, being able to be open to that is a gift for you. And if you've got children, it's most definitely a gift to them, because, you know, there was this quote that a friend said to me, and it was, "No one is waiting at the end of this with a medal for you getting it through this the hard way." And that really hit me. I'm like, oh yeah, no, God, the kids are better off when I'm supported and when I'm okay. Like, I would say that's another gift from all of this, is I've really doubled down on taking care of myself. I mean, if I go down, the ship goes down. So I sleep well, I prioritize rest, you know, I move my body and I eat as well as I can. I have boundaries. I say no to things when I'm feeling overwhelmed. That's something that not a lot of people get in the practice of, but I see it as essential to my family. And so, yeah, I would just say, do little things to take care of you and accept the help that's around you, because you're probably way less alone than you feel.
And just finally, is there a quote, you've just mentioned one from during that time, but is there a quote that resonates with you most at this point in your life?
Well, yeah, that quote still. And it's probably not a quote, but it's life as a creative act. I really think that we're actually moving into a really tricky time in the world. I have been deep diving for the last year and a half on AI and, you know, even just things like where we're at with climate change, and the level of disruption that we're coming into in the next few years is real. And I think humans are amazing, and I think we're creative, and I think we need to honour the creative ideas, especially that our kids have about living and what living well looks like, because, you know, it is really, really going to change. So letting go of this ideas of the status quo being the way that things work, being loose and creative with all of it, like every single piece of it is not as set in stone as we think it is in a bigger picture world sense, but in our like literal daily lives. So life as a creative act is something that I think about all the time.
Thank you so much. You've been so generous with your story and with your vulnerability and your humour, and I really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thanks for allowing me to share. It's really nice.
Thank you to all my guests for sharing their stories so generously. The Widow Diaries is hosted and produced by me, Caroline Winter from Pod Talk, for First Light Widowed Support, which provides information, resources and connection for young widowed people throughout Australia. Follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and you can also find out more information at firstlight.org.au. This podcast acknowledges and celebrates the traditional custodians of the land and waters on which stories have been told for thousands of years and on which this podcast is recorded.